Alex, I was looking at this old cherry offcut this morning, and it hit me that most folks look at a piece of lumber like it's a printed sheet of paper. They see the pretty lines on the surface and think, that'll look nice as a box lid. But they don't realize they're actually holding a bundle of soda straws held together with dried honey.
A bundle of soda straws? That's remarkably unappetizing, Tiger. But I get it. We're talking about wood grain, right? The thing everyone thinks they understand until their hand plane digs a chunk out of $100 board.
Precise. It's that deceptive surface. We call it figure when it looks fancy, but grain is the actual plumbing of the tree. It's how the thing drank and stood up against the wind for 50 years. If you don't respect that history, the wood will find a way to remind you who's boss. I remember building a white oak cabinet base early on. I ignored the grain direction because I wanted the pretty side facing out. First pass with the joiner sounded like a Gatling gun, and it spat out chips the size of cornflakes. I basically turned a premium board into expensive kindling in 3 seconds.
And that's why we're doing this deep dive today. Because wood isn't just a material, it's a living, formerly living structure. We're breaking down the physics of those straws, why some grain makes you want to weep with joy, while others make you want to take up knitting, and how to actually outsmart a board before it outsmarts you.
Let's start with the basics. If you imagine a tree growing, it's adding layers. Like we said, they're fibers, long cellulose tubes. Straight grain is the easy street. The fibers run parallel to the length of your board. It's predictable. It's the Honda Civic of lumber. It doesn't give you any lip.
Okay, so straight grain is the good kid, but nobody spends big bucks on a Honda Civic tabletop. People want the curls, the waves, the tiger stripes. What's actually happening in the tree when we see that crazy bird's eye or curly figure?
That is the tree having a bit of a midlife crisis. Technically, things like curly or wavy grain happen when the fibers decide to grow in a zigzag or a spiral instead of straight up. It's often caused by the weight of the branches or just genetic quirks. In interlocked grain, the fibers actually switch directions layer by layer. It's like a braid. It's gorgeous to look at because the light hits those alternating angles and shimmers. We call that chatoyancy, meaning it's a total nightmare to flatten with hand tools.
I've seen you staring at a board for 5 minutes before even touching a saw. What are you actually looking for? You're not just admiring the view, are you?
I'm looking for the escape route. Most people look at the face of the board. I look at the edges and the ends. If you look at the side of a board, the grain lines usually run at a slight angle. That's runout. If those lines are heading down and you push your plane up, you're going to catch those fibers and rip them out. You have to pet the cat with the fur, not against it.
Petting the cat. I like that. But what about when the cat has fur growing in 3 different directions? I'm thinking of those beautiful walnut crotches or burls.
Then you need a very sharp blade and a lot of patience, or a drum sander. But seriously, understanding the why helps. Take red oak versus white oak. This is a classic shop trick. If you take a piece of red oak and blow into the end grain, you can actually blow bubbles in a glass of water on the other side. The pores are wide open. White oak, though, it's plugged up with these microscopic growths called tyloses.
Which is why we make whiskey barrels out of white oak and not red oak. Otherwise, the whiskey would just leak out like it was in a sieve.
You'd have a very happy floor and a very sad bartender. But that structure affects everything. It's why white oak is a bear to glue sometimes, but it'll last outside for 100 years. It's also why some woods feel fuzzy when you sand them. Those straws are getting shredded instead of cut cleanly.
You mentioned earlier that grain affects stability. Whenever I see a beautiful, wide plank tabletop, I'm always waiting for the crack in the middle of the night. How much of that is just the grain being temperamental?
It's not temperament, it's just the wood trying to reach equilibrium. Think of wood as a sponge. Straight-grained wood is a stable sponge. It expands and contracts mostly across its width. But if you have wild grain, like in a big knot or a swirl, that section moves in 3 directions at once. It's like a tug of war where nobody wins. If you don't account for that in your joinery, if you pin it down too tight, the wood will literally tear itself apart just to breathe.
So, the pretty wood is basically the high-maintenance partner of the workshop.
Exactly. She's beautiful, but she's going to cost you in therapy hours. For structural stuff, the legs of a workbench or the rails of a chair, I want straight grain. I want those fibers running unbroken from top to bottom. If the grain runs diagonally across a chair leg, that's a built-in snap point. You sit down after a heavy Thanksgiving dinner and crack, you're on the floor because the grain ran out the side of the leg.
I'll keep that in mind before I host next November. Sorry, Uncle Bob. The grain run out on this chair isn't rated for your third helping of mashed potatoes.
You know, there's this old school way of getting parts called riving. Most of us go to the lumber yard and buy sawn boards, but if you take a log and actually split it with a wedge, the crack follows the grain perfectly. It's like a miracle.
Like pulling apart a string cheese?
Exactly like string cheese. When you rive a piece of wood, you aren't cutting across any of those straws. Every single fiber goes from one end to the other. That makes the wood incredibly strong and, more importantly, a dream to work. You can take a draw knife to a riven piece of ash, and you don't even have to think about grain direction because the tool is just traveling down a pre-made highway.
But we can't all just go out and split logs in our driveways. Most of us are stuck with what the big box store or the local mill gives us.
True, but the lesson is the same. Learn to read the board. Before you even flip the switch on a machine, look at the face, the edge, and the end. If the grain is diving into the table, flip the board around. If it's swirling like a whirlpool, slow your feed rate down. It's about listening to what the tree was doing when it was standing.
It sounds like reading wood is half the battle. If you could give someone one tip for their next trip to the lumber yard to avoid the cornflake disaster you had, what would it be?
Look at the end grain. Always. If the growth rings are standing up straight, what we call quarter sawn, that board is going to be your best friend. It moves less, it finishes easier, and it stays flat. If the rings are arching like a rainbow, flat sawn, just know you're in for a bit of a dance. It's going to cup, it's going to move, and you'll need to plan for it.
So basically, don't be blinded by a pretty face. Check the roots.
You got it. Woodworking is really just a long-term negotiation with a dead plant. The more you understand its past, the better your future project is going to look.
Negotiation with a dead plant. That's going on a t-shirt.
It's the truth. But when you get it right, when you align that grain and the light catches it just so, it's like the wood is alive again. There's a depth there that no paint or plastic can ever touch. It's worth the tuition, and it's definitely worth the extra 5 minutes of staring at the end of a board.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap. Go pet your cats, the wooden ones, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care of your tools, and they'll take care of you.